Deaf people, what did you think made a sound, but then found out it actually didn't? When I first got my hearing aid, I realized I could leave the kitchen fan on for weeks and never notice. Suddenly I was like, wait, this thing has been screaming at me the whole time? And don't even get me started on my kitten. Turns out that tiny furball is super chatty. I had no idea before. One big takeaway, you hearing folks live in a ridiculously noisy world. The difference is your brain learns to filter out background sounds. Since I was a teenager, I sometimes sit completely still just to test myself. How many different sounds can I pick up right now? It's wild to realize I'm constantly filtering out faraway traffic, birds singing, or the hum of a fan. I've got a deaf friend who learned that rain and wind make sounds, so naturally she assumed snow did too. She was shooketh when it finally snowed and realized it's completely silent when falling, but she loved the crunchy sound it makes under your boots. And here's the cool part, when there's heavy snowfall, the world actually gets quieter. Snowflakes work like natural soundproofing, each one soaking up a bit of sound energy. When the air is full of them, it's like the whole world gets wrapped in fluffy cotton. I'm not fully deaf, but I have hearing issues. For years, I never realized how much I was missing. Then I finally got a hearing aid. What shocked me most wasn't the specific sounds, it was how loud the world actually is. Ordinary things I'd forgotten or never really heard suddenly came alive. Walking outside, I was blown away by how many birds were singing around me. Even gravel crunching under my shoes or leaves rustling in the wind felt almost overwhelming at first. It really hit me how much the brain filters out and labels as silence. Back in college, there was this guy who used to be deaf until he got implants. He was shocked that electric light bulbs don't make noise. He had just assumed they had some kind of constant hum. And to be fair, some of them do that annoying buzz, please end me background sound, but most are just chill little light orbs. I'm not deaf, but I once worked with someone who was deaf from birth and also had schizophrenia. He told me that he could hear his auditory hallucinations. I still can't fully wrap my head around that, but apparently it's not that rare among deaf folks, especially when they take off their hearing aids at night. With no real input, the brain sometimes creates phantom sounds. In his case, it was probably even stronger because of the schizophrenia. I grew up with a deaf brother and sister. My brother lost his hearing at 13 due to scarlet fever, so he knew what things sounded like, but over 27 years, he forgot almost everything. For most of that time, he was about 97% deaf. Then he got bilateral cochlear implants. He had forgotten or didn't know that cabinets actually make noise. He spent 10 minutes opening and closing one squeaky cabinet, totally zoning out. He'd also forgotten about birds singing until one morning he sat outside in awe listening to all those tiny sounds. I'd read that wind makes noise, but it wasn't until I turned 16 and got a high-tech hearing aid that I truly realized just how loud wind can be. I have a deaf friend who now has cochlear implants. We met for coffee, and right after we entered the building, a heavy rain started. We went up to the second floor and chatted for a few minutes, but she kept glancing around, clearly puzzled. Finally, she asked, "What is that sound? The AC or is something broken?" She'd been there before and knew the usual background noise, so it took me a minute to realize that the sound she didn't recognize was the pounding rain hitting the flat ceiling above us. I worked at a school for deaf kids. One teacher had to explain to a classroom of 10-year-olds, yes, farting does not make a sound. I'm truly deaf, and for a long time I had terrible hearing aids. Here are some examples of sounds I discovered. 1. Fingertips touching objects. Pressure doesn't always make a sound. Weird. 2. Wind blowing through a hedge or bush. I thought plants would scream at each other or argue loudly, but nope. 3. Cats walking around. Actually very quiet. 4. Flowing water. Only makes a sound when it hits something. On its own, it's silent. 5. TV remote buttons. Depends on the model, sometimes there's no click. 6. A thing that holds a screen door open with a rod on a thinner long tube. I always thought the door itself made a sound, but actually it's just the metal rattling. I used to think that butterflies made this soft, shimmery buzzing sound when flying. Turns out, they're actually tiny, silent ninjas. My sister is deaf also. A few years ago, she got cochlear implants. She's also into running, and one day she was completely shocked to learn that her chest doesn't actually make sounds while bouncing during a run. My uncle is deaf. When he first got his hearing aid, he was absolutely floored that refrigerators make noise. Like, he legit thought they were silent boxes of cold magic. But the real twist? He was even more surprised that trees don't make their own sound. Sure, he knew about wind wrestling through the leaves, but he honestly believed the trees themselves hummed or vibrated, because he'd read so many times about the sound of trees. When you're standing in an old forest, you do hear creaks, groans, and snaps from branches swaying, but that's not the trees themselves humming like some kind of leafy dubstep. My cousin was 100% convinced that the sun makes noise. When he finally got his hearing aid, he went outside expecting a cosmic rave and was shocked that it was totally quiet. Honestly, he felt kind of relieved. Fun fact though, he wasn't totally wrong. If sound could travel through space, the sun would be insanely loud, like turn the volume knob down universe loud. But cosmic vacuum equals mute button. About 10 years ago, I had a deaf neighbor. She showed me her doorbell system. Instead of ringing, it flashed lights in a specific rhythm. Honestly, it was pretty awesome, like having your own personal rave entrance alarm. I'm deaf and have been been using hearing aids for about a year and a half. Every time I get a new device, I discover random things I never knew made noise. Like when I was in my 20s, I had no idea that brushing hair away from my hearing aid actually makes a sound, or that wind whistles when you're driving, or that my dog's collar tag clinks against the car window. After getting implants, the adjustment isn't instant. For months, the devices are fine-tuned. He wore them a few hours at a time and then took them off. At first, everything sounded like an old speak and spell toy from the 70s and 80s. 6 months later, his hearing reached at about 85%. He didn't really have the "I thought this made a sound, but it doesn't" moments, just realizing he'd forgotten how certain things actually sound because he hadn't experienced them in so long. I have a friend who can't smell. Back in college, we were sitting in a packed lecture hall. He stood up, let one rip, and walked around the room. I shouted, "You're spreading your stinky chaos to the whole class." He was like, "Wait, it does spread?" Turns out he hadn't known this crucial fact for over 20 years and had been unintentionally spraying everyone around him. Turning things on and off from the wall, no mechanical click confirming the plug is snug. I was furious. How can that not make a sound? Same goes for old school modem plugs slipping out, or an Ethernet cable slightly popping. No beep, no nothing. Mind equals blown. Breeding hair. Thought it'd be noisy, but almost silent. I'm not fully deaf, but my hearing is really bad. For almost 40 years, my older brother convinced me that silence isn't really silent. He kept throwing around phrases like the sound of silence and silence is deafening, so I lived thinking that true silence didn't exist. Then I finally got a hearing aid. Within hours, I realized what those phrases meant, and honestly, I felt like a total noob. For me, silence is never silent. I have tinnitus, so my ears are basically a 24/7 rave party no one asked for. I volunteer as a translator at a school for deaf kids, and I've been working with one boy for over 2 years. He recently got a hearing aid. One day I yawned, and he was blown away that it was basically silent. He had always assumed yawns should sound like some kind of tiny dinosaur roar. I remember teaching a class of deaf students and having to explain to them that people can actually hear when they toot. Had to gather the class together for a full-on "yes guys, your potato cannon noises are real to others" lesson. My older brother is deaf. When he first got a hearing aid, he called me in a total panic. Dude didn't realize that wind moving through leaves makes noise. He thought his device was glitching out. I had to explain, nope, that's just how trees gossip with the wind. Funniest call ever. My neighbor got an implant as a teenager. Before that, someone told him that fire makes a crackling sound, so for some reason he assumed water must do the same. My parents are deaf. My mom got cochlear implants, and one of her funniest discoveries was that she makes sounds in public restrooms. She didn't know her pee actually makes noise, or that gas echoes loudly in the stalls. She was also surprised that she could hear other people in adjacent stalls doing the same thing. She also realized how annoying ticking clocks can be, and the clacking of a dog's paws on hardwood or tile. When someone gets implants for the first time, it takes a while to learn to filter out all these sounds. Heard this wild story about a guy who didn't realize people knock on doors. He thought it was straight up magic or insane luck that someone was always right there opening the door the exact moment another person arrived. I'm deaf, and usually it's like, whoa, that thing actually makes a sound? Rarely the opposite. But just the other day, I was messing with my printer and moved something inside it, fully expecting it to make some kind of clunky robot noise. I asked, that should be loud, right? Nope, totally silent. My brain did a full error 404. I'm deaf from birth, and a couple of years ago, I got my latest hearing aid. For the first time, I heard myself pee. Over 40 years, I had no idea that urine actually makes a sound when leaving your body. Mind blown. Switching TV channels looks like it should make a sound, click or whiz, but it doesn't. Stretching rubber bands, hair ties, etc. looks and feels like it should make noise, but nope, totally silent. Erasers and hair ties, silent. I always thought erasing in class was announcing myself loudly. Turns out, nope. When I was around 2 and got a new hearing aid, I was absolutely mind blown to find out that air conditioners make a sound when they start blowing. Had no clue before that. When I got married, my ex-husband's deaf cousin offered to film the wedding. Why not, right? He didn't notice any of the sounds his 2-year-old daughter was making while he held her next to the camera, completely oblivious to all the tiny chaos happening around him. My sister is deaf and she loves cats. One of my favorite memories, she'd grab my hand and place it on the ribs of a purring cat. I don't even know if she realizes that purring can actually be heard too, but I'm never telling her. The joy she gets from just feeling that little furry engine rumble is pure magic. Thanks so much for watching. In the comments, share what you thought made a sound but later realized it doesn't. And don't forget to check out our other videos. See ya!